other comment. On page 24 is the first area. This is regarding the road use agreements. In the first paragraph, it starts out with this amount shall be reviewed every 3 years and increased at 2 times the rate of inflation. I would like that to read the previous 2 years' actual accumulative inflation rate. And also the same previous 2 years' actual accumulative inflation rate on page 25, under the drainage easement number 2.
Easy enough to do. Again, any planning commission discussion on those points before we commit to making it?
Change it to 2 years review? Is that
Accumulative.
No, the review is still 2 years, correct?
The review period's the same, but I want them to use the previous 2 years accumulative.
Okay.
Yeah. It increases that substantially.
Especially right now.
Yes, sir. That's why I wanted to change it. I have a question for fellow PC members. In several places under the decommissioning, we're requiring that everything be removed, and I don't know at what point that may or may not conflict with any of the leases. So let's say there was a lease and there was a slab they wanted to keep. We have everything being totally commissioned. Is there a provision in which if the lease says otherwise, that property owner would be required to submit a site plan for anything they're gonna retain during decommissioning? Or are we going to say leaseholders, too bad, decommissioning, it's all done, and that's what it is? Just spoke to someone in California, they're using it to store irrigation and other products. There was a value to what was there.
They'd have to apply for a permit to keep it though.
They'd have to keep, yeah, they have to apply for a site plan. And Ron and Paul, if you have any thoughts or input, please feel free, but.
Well, that's certainly fine. Yeah, you wouldn't be bound by whatever the lease says. Somebody executing a lease that has certain terms doesn't preclude the township from exercising its authority. But I think the simpler answer is that if somebody actually wants to keep it, they would just have to come in and get site plan approval for it for some other use, for a storage area as opposed to a foundation for a WEX.
So if we had something that including, shall any portion, foundation, slab, access road, or other compacted improvements to the property be retained, the owner shall be required to submit site plan approval pursuant to our zoning.
Well, I think the easiest way to do that is in subparagraph B1 of the decommissioning provisions we're looking at, page 37. It's already has a proviso at the end that allows the board to extend the period. I think what we could add there is something that says, and provided further, foundational elements of a WEX could be retained by the landowner provided they obtain site plan approval under the terms of this ordinance.
Yeah, and it could be the access road as well. Maybe they're using it for farming or other purposes, so.
Okay with that, Rick? Yeah. Good. There should be hopefully some other use for all that that's left behind. I don't know.
Right. I do want to thank Ron for making sure that the Spicer information was circulated. I think the prior PC took a lot of time in looking at the LMAX versus LAQ, and it was very helpful to receive that information, so thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, the next procedure will be to approve this. Next procedure, I believe. Next procedure is to, approve this. Ron?
Yeah, what the procedure would be for somebody, provided this is what somebody wants to do, is to put a motion on the floor to recommend that the township board approve the principal Wex ordinance, subject to the changes that were discussed at tonight's meeting. Okay, that'd be the first item, and just so we don't forget it, the second item, we've got that part two, if you will, that we'll need to discuss after that, just so you know that's next up.
I got one more question about that part two.
Well, let's
get
yeah,
this.
clear the agenda on this, and then we can.
So we need a motion to approve this and send it on to the township board.
Recommend it.
Recommend a
Approval by the
recommendation
township board.
to the township board, this ordinance.
Subject to the revisions we discussed this evening.
Correct.
I recommend, or I motion, sorry, that we recommend to the board to approve the ordinance with the revisions that we've just made.
There's a motion on the floor, is there support?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, any more discussion? Baldwin?
No.
Awful?
Yes.
Schwarzy? Tammy?
Yes.
Sold?
Yes.
Motion carries. This will be recommended to the full board then. And now, back to Ron with the, other one that we had.
Rick, you had a question? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you said that could be, the 2017 could be referendum.
Yes. And that's really the fairness element that I admittedly was doing a poor job of explaining last time. Is that the 2017 ordinance is on the books. And I understand there's a debatable question about whether that can be invalidated or not, in court, based on the problems in the adoption procedures. I tend to think it's less likely that that would be successful. I think it's unfair that the public was deprived of the opportunity to seek a referendum at the time it was adopted because of the failure of publishing the notice to adopt. So if it is readopted now as part of that saving clause, a referendum could be asserted at this time and successfully wipe it off the books. And I think that is the fair outcome, if that's what should have happened the first time. That opportunity should have been provided.
Would it run concurrent?
So now
What
we
we're doing
need
now?
to, have a recommendation for the saving grace, basically, ordinance to the board.
If it can, Jack, I want to answer that question, because it is a good question, and the answer is yes. If the board adopts both,
Microphone.
thank you. If the board adopts both these ordinances at the same time, the time periods for filing a notice of intent and for seeking signatures would run concurrently with each other.
So basically, what you're saying, don't ask me if this works. Basically, what you're saying is you want us to readopt the 2017 ordinance to make it so they can referendum, right? Is that?
That's correct, but it's being done in a conditional way where 2017 wouldn't take effect at all unless there's a successful referendum on the principal ordinance. Okay? That's the way it's written. If the principal ordinance takes effect, that and was not referendum, that in itself would wipe out the 2017 ordinance. But what we have to face is the prospect, because it's been articulated many times at meetings, that people are gonna seek a referendum on the principal ordinance. And so this gives away, by readopting it conditionally, that the public will then have an opportunity to seek that referendum that they you know, we're legally entitled to in the first
At the
place.
same time.
The time periods would run concurrently for filing the notice of intent and seeking referendum signature.
Any other discussion?
I just, that 2017 is just really troubling because we've really gone through that. I mean, deeply, way deeper than when we ever talked about it originally. And it is so incomplete in protecting anything, you know, the township, the people, it just seems that, like, maybe we should just, I don't know, the void of not having something there, what happens in that case?
Well, that's just it, there won't, well, you mean if there's a referendum on both, we do this saving clause under the referendum, we will have effectively, and when I say we, I mean the township will have effectively no choice at that time but to adopt another moratorium and hit the ground running again on a replacement.
But wouldn't it be better to get rid of the 2017 before? Instead of falling back on the 2017, fall back on the good one.
Well, the thing is, we don't really have that option because it's on the books now. It's there. Okay, and that, they keep.
If it was, okay,
Even if it is subject to invalidation, the thing that I think is being incorrectly stated is it just becomes void because somebody pointed out problems with its adoption. The case law is very clear on that point, that it doesn't just become void because somebody said, hey, you forgot this step. It takes somebody affirmatively to go into court and file a lawsuit to achieve that result with an uncertain outcome, okay? That's an expensive and time-consuming process. Okay, the referendum process is your grassroots democracy in action way to bring about that same result. Okay, and I think it is the fairer outcome because it's what should have happened in the first place.
So we need a motion to recommend the second ordinance to the board now, correct, Ron?
Well, my recommendation is you do that with the savings clause back in it, which is a conditional adoption of the 2017 ordinance, or re-adoption of that.
So, a referendum is the only way to get rid of the 2017. There's no way for us to go, look, it was, you know, no one's happy with it, we're not happy with it, it wasn't done correctly, let's just get rid of it. We know that's what they want, that's what we would.
It is not the only way. The principal WEX ordinance includes a repeal of the 2017 ordinance, so if this goes into effect, it is gone.
Barring that, is there a way for us to rescind it?
Yes, it is possible for you to engage a new public hearing on a ordinance that is for the sole purpose of repealing the 2017 ordinance. And then the board would have to act on that as well. They would have to take the planning commission's recommendation and do that.
But it has to be a completely separate meeting from today. We'd have to call another.
There would have to be a whole new public hearing at this point.
Any other discussion?
So this plan is really the quickest way to get rid of 2017 that nobody likes.
Quicker is hard to say. I mean, the referendum process could maybe, actually might run a little slower because by, you know, there's only 4 election slots a year, so it would probably take longer. So I don't know if it's necessarily true to say it's the quickest. It most resembles what rights the public should have had in the first instance. Don't keep.
I would like to make a motion that we submit for approval to the board the ordinance, including the savings clause, to give the power back to the people regarding 2017.
No.
Is there support?
Can I ask a quick follow-up question first then? So can we do both? Could we, for instance, add the savings clause back to this, recommend to send the second ordinance to the board with that savings clause in. And then also make a motion to have another special hearing to rescind the 2017.
Yes.
Okay, then I second Tammy's motion.
Any other discussion? I'm a little confused.
The question that was asked.
I'm confused.
Yeah, the question that was asked, if we go down this path right now, recommending to the board to adopt the second ordinance with the savings clause included, the question was, could the planning commission then also, at a subsequent meeting, hold a public hearing on a proposed ordinance, the sole purpose of which would be to repeal the 2017 provisions? Standalone, that's all accomplished. Could that be done? And my answer was yes.
So what I would suggest, what my suggestion was, is to go ahead and send this, to get it done, get it sent. But then afterwards, I'm going to make a motion that we hold another hearing specifically for the 2017 ordinance to send to our board to have it rescinded, to get rid of it. He said that's what we could do.
I think leaving that 2017 ordinance in there is putting a target on the other one.
If we hold the hearing to rescind it, it's a non-issue, then it won't, right? If we have that before.
So why don't we set the hearing to rescind it instead of sending it? And just send it.
I think they have to adopt the ordinances for us to rescind them. Otherwise, we're rescinding it for nothing.
Well, the 2017 they already did, it's just so.
But then there's nothing to replace it.
Ron, what's your advice?
Well, there's a lot of different iterations of this. That's fine if we go that route. I think it maximizes the possibility for those in the public who would like to see that outcome for it to come to fruition, because on one hand, they have their right of referendum to achieve that result. And they also have the opportunity that the board might ultimately act on the outright repeal of 2017. I can't speak for the board whether they would entertain that or not, because I don't know whether they want to be in a position of having nothing on the books for wind energy conserved systems. So just because the planning commission might take that action doesn't mean the board necessarily follows in step, but at least gives the opportunity for both channels to potentially come to fruition and one of them to be successful.
I'm confused why we're doing it, yeah. I mean, I understand the savings clause, but that's gonna be something that comes right out real fast. The people are gonna want that, they're gonna referendum that one, 2017. I mean, it's just pretty automatic, I think.
Well, the way I'm understanding it, or the way I'm assuming it, is that, so if we send it with the savings clause in, that still gives the right of referendum, but we can also schedule a public hearing and we can recommend to the board separately, hey, we want this gone, please rescind it. So it gives them a twofold, all of us, a twofold way of getting rid of that. If for some reason the board says we're not going to rescind it, it's gotta be referendum, then it's in this ordinance, then they can referendum. If not, then we can just get rid of the 2017 first. That's how I'm,
Yeah, you've correctly surmised, and Rick, you're right, none of these are perfect paths forward. And that's a result of admittedly some problems with the way the 2017 ordinance was adopted that's given rise to these issues. I think, again, the fairest way to do that is to recreate the conditions that should have existed when the 2017 was adopted, that's giving the public a right of referendum. And there's no harm, and it's another avenue if the planning commission wants to go forward with an outright repealing ordinance that would run concurrently. Both of them might be successful, one might moot the other, but time will tell.
Any other questions, because we have a, motion on the floor and a second to recommend to the board the second ordinance with the saving clause in it. Any other discussion? Baldwin?
I don't know. I'm gonna say no. I don't think it's,
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Motion carries. Everything is recommended to go to the full board then. I believe that takes care of all of our business.
No, you need to set a hearing now.
No,
This is, we're done up here. I'm not done with the public comment, okay?
well, I wanted to make a motion to have a special hearing.
Don't we have to wait for the board to approve what we're sending through now before we can set a public hearing?
No, you
Okay.
can act independently on this.
Okay.
Just, when you're doing this, so we gotta take a look at the dates, because the notice of public hearing has to go out 15 days in advance, and then you gotta add about another week to that to get it to the newspaper. So, when you're selecting your date, you've gotta pick a date that allows you that lead time to do it. Let's see, your next regular meeting would be
July.
July, okay, then there's time to do that before the July meeting.
Can we do it at the July meeting?
Yes, you can hold public hearings on proposed amendments in concurrently with
We did that with
any
the
special or
HOA.
regular
We had
meeting.
our, we had our public hearing before our regular meeting, so it depends on how fast you wanna move on it.
We do it at a July meeting, like August date
Our July meeting is, July 27th. Is that quick enough, Beck?
Yeah, I guess I'm fine with that, as long as we're moving. Right.
So Becky made a motion to have a public hearing to get rid of the 2017 ordinance. Is there support for that?
I'll support that.
Any other discussion?
I just think it would've been easier to just recommend it, instead of tying it in, just recommend it to the board to rescind that, or whatever they
Still
do.
would have had to have a public hearing on it and everything.
Well, public hearing is fine. I just,
And that's kind of where
it's
we're
the other step, I just think is a wasted step in there.
Ron, would you, make sure that the notice gets put in the paper?
I will. I'll do that.
Timing. Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on having a public hearing on the 27th of July. Rick?
Yes.
Pat? Tammy?
Yes.
Becky?
Yes.
Motion carries. Any other business?
Do we need to start having conversations regarding the master plan?
Yes, in July's meeting, we will have Ron start reviewing, and we will review our master plan for Rick, or Paul, yeah, the guy down there, the bald guy. We'll start reviewing our master plan, and there's a few other things that we need to clean up on our ordinances, so. Any other business with the commission up here? Now we have public comment. Who wants to start with public comment?
I have a
State your
problem.
name.
Pardon?
Name.
I'm sorry, Christy Williams, 1990 West Pleas Road, Sandy, Michigan. I have an ordinance zoning that was brought to our attention for, a complaint that was made on my property. 2 of those vehicles are mud bog trucks and are off-road. And the person that made that complaint, luckily he's not here, because he was trespassing on my property to find out that those vehicles did not have plates. So, I'm just letting you know, as public people in this building, 29 people got these in one day. 29 people in our area. After 22 years of my husband living on the property, exact same two mud bog trucks, we just got a complaint.
How many dead cats do you got?
Yeah, well, there's 3 dead cats in my field, and I'd like to know about that too, because the police are being called on that. And this neighbor that complained and trespassed on my property is the one that sat right up there and threatened killing cats. And I'm putting it right out there right now. 3 dead shot cats in my horse arena that I haven't used. So I'm telling you now, if I've not ever had anybody trespass on my property, I do have a concealed weapons permit, and so does my husband, and I will protect my property. Do not come on my property again, whoever complained about it and left the 3 dead cats on there that I just found yesterday.
Anyone else? Yep.
Let's talk about the seaplane space again, still.
Rick, state your name, Rick.
Rick Harris.
3 minutes.
Clifford Lake. Couple things. Number one, about the gentleman that talked about flying around turbines. I've got couple of responses to that. Number one, Murphy's Law. What can happen eventually will happen. Number two, even good pilots, smart pilots do stupid stuff. And I was just flipping through my phone, even with the lousy reception we have here, and I've got 4 dead after plane strikes wind turbine. That was South Dakota. Widow sues FAA for wind turbine airplane crash. Beverly plane, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. That's what we're trying to check. Second thing is, for Mr. Reddick, the 1.89 rule that you got, was that airplanes or was that float planes? Was that an airport or was that a seaport? Because it's a huge difference. Airplanes climb at a much better rate than a float plane. That's a question, you can answer it if you want. Also, have you decided that FAR 77.23 does not apply, which is the FAA rule? That's a question you can answer or not. And the last thing is, there's no business that I would know of ever that transacted at the seaport there. It's just private guys coming in, guys and gals, come in and flying the planes in and out. There's no business, nothing commercial about that. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Yep.
Kathy Craig, Douglas Township. I'm severely disappointed that you guys voted to move this ordinance on. We had a public hearing, last public hearing about it. A lot of people spoke about lowering the sound limits, lowering the height limit, the setbacks from the river at 600 feet. That setback needs to be increased. A lot of people spoke, and after the public comments was done, the public hearing, nothing was really done about any of that. So I'm really disappointed that this is how it stands. Also, I would like to point out that while this is public comment and you do not have to answer any questions, nothing precludes you from doing so. So I would like a question answered, and one of the PC members is feel free to ask. I'd like to ask Mr. Reddick why a 150-foot height limit in Grand Haven Charter Township is legally defensible and not exclusionary, but in Douglas Township, that would be considered exclusionary and not legally defensible.
What you got, Ron?
We're paying for this.
I don't want to just close it, shut the meeting down.
Just waiting for her time to get up, because she hasn't gotten an answer yet.
No, that's okay.
Ron works for
I have a
Jackson.
comment too, so
Okay.
make sure.
That's good, Rick.
Time's up. Next.
Linda Reynolds, Douglas. Almost embarrassed to say that now. I've met some of the kindest people here, but I've also found out things about people I thought were decent that have proved me wrong. Again, I hate it. Looking at the 2017 on here, the circled part right here says draft. I've asked about this before. The page back here with all their signatures and everything says, once it's put in the paper, it becomes the law, the ordinance. I thank you, Becky, for what you did. Why that didn't happen a long time ago is beyond me. So thank you, because it needed to be done. Thank you for your votes, Rick, on both of them, because as confused as all of you are over this fixing the 17, imagine what we are. We're totally confused. If you can't get it, back and forth having to ask and what have you, we surely don't get it. So chances are both of these, once they go to the county, they come back to the board, they will be in a referendum because they're not protecting us.
Or negated.
That's it. Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm not standing this time. Melissa Bannock, Douglas Township, Pine Township. How much longer are we paying for this end of the table? You do realize how much has been going out. I work hard for my money. I'm sure everybody else does. We right here probably represent a lot of people that pay the taxes in this township. Paul said one word today, and he goes on and gets us so confused, nobody has a clue. Most of us have college educations, and we're still going, did he say this, or did he not say that, or did he say this? We go to a board meeting, and they're like, yep, 217's done, we didn't do it right, you're right, it's done, was on tape. I asked Harry twice, you mean it's null and void? Yep. Then you guys are all sitting here going on about it 2 years later.